Mac lived alone, more comfortable with shadows than people. The old mansion suited him, forgotten grandeur, shrouded in ivy and silence. Dust motes drifted through pale light from grimy windows. The air was thick with decay and the weight of years. Mac wandered the empty halls, his footsteps echoing. At night, he sat by the fireplace, watching flickering shadows twist on the walls. He told himself he liked the quiet, that solitude gave him space to think. But lately the silence felt oppressive, as if the house itself was waiting. A creeping unease had begun to worm its way into his heart. It started subtly, a faint sound like a sigh. He heard it at night when the house creaked and groaned. At first he dismissed it. Old houses made noises, but the sound persisted, coming from his bedroom wall. He'd lie in bed, listening as it grew louder, a rhythmic rasp, like breathing. Mac tried to rationalize. Pipes, rats, anything. One night, the sound was louder than ever, a steady, rasping breath. Mac's heart pounded as he pressed his ear to the cold plaster. The breathing was close, so close it seemed just beyond the wall. His blood ran cold. This was no rat. This was something else, something alive. Sleep became his enemy. Each night, the breathing grew stronger, invading his dreams with suffocating nightmares. Mac would bolt upright, heart racing, his own ragged breath echoing in the room. Earplugs, pillows, nothing worked. The sound seeped through everything. Days were no better. The memory of the breathing haunted him. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Every creak, every sigh of wind sent a jolt of fear through him. He tried to distract himself, reading music, even inviting a friend over. The conversation was strained. His friend noticed the haunted look in his eyes. Mac brushed it off, but he knew the truth. The wall was taking over his life. He was becoming obsessed. The sound had a rhythm now. A slow inhalation, a pause, a rasping exhalation, like a heartbeat. Mac found himself unconsciously syncing his breath to it. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, but he knew better. The rhythm was too steady, too deliberate, almost expectant. He started avoiding his bedroom, sleeping on the couch. But the sound followed him, fainter but still there. He couldn't escape it. It was as if the house itself was breathing. The unseen presence infected every wall. Mac's fear curdled into a cold, gnawing dread. He felt trapped. He pored over old blueprints, searching for answers. The wall held no secrets, no hidden chambers, no vents. He scoured the internet for similar stories, but nothing matched. The breathing was too real, too visceral. His research became obsession. He neglected everything else. The more he learned, the less he understood, and that terrified him. One night, unable to resist, Mac stood before the wall. He pressed his hand to the plaster, feeling the vibration of breath. It was closer, stronger. He couldn't turn away. Compelled, he fetched a sledgehammer from the garage. His hands shook as he raised it, hesitating. But he couldn't stop now. He had to see what was breathing inside his wall. He swung the sledgehammer. Cracks spiderwebbed across the wallpaper. Dust billowed. Each swing was harder, driven by fear and grim satisfaction. The first layer of plaster crumbled, revealing bricks. He paused, apprehensive, but pressed on. A jagged hole appeared. Max stared into the darkness, heart pounding. He held his breath, listening. The breathing was louder, closer. It seemed to come from the hole itself. He knelt, peering into the cavity. It was pitch black, the air thick with dust and decay. He shone his phone's flashlight inside, hand trembling. The narrow space was cramped, cobbled with bricks. He thought he saw something move, a flicker, gone in a blink. He pulled back, heart racing, but curiosity overpowered fear. He should stop, but he couldn't. He had to see what was hiding in the darkness. He started widening the hole. Brick by brick, he broke through. Sweat stung his eyes. Dread fueled every swing. The hole was big enough to see inside, a narrow space barely wide enough for a person. The breathing was louder than ever, echoing in the confined space. He shone his light further in. Then he saw it, a skeletal hand, yellowed and stretched with age. He recoiled as the hand twitched. Mac dropped his phone, its light rolling into the cavity. He scrambled to retrieve it, panic rising. As he reached for the flashlight, the breathing changed. It was closer, directly in front of him. Two eyes glinted in the darkness, reflecting the faint light, sunken, yellowed, unblinking. A gaunt face materialized, lips pulled back in a silent grimace. The eyes were alive, staring with chilling intensity. The figure didn't move or speak, just watched, breathing the only sound. Mac knew he'd made a terrible mistake. He had found something he was never meant to see. And now it was looking back at him. The flashlight beam trembled, casting wild shadows. The hole revealed a narrow cavity, barely the width of a man. Something huddled inside, a grotesque parody of a human shape. Mac's mind struggled to process what he saw. He wanted to look away, to run, but the eyes held him captive. The breathing was shallow, but undeniably there. Mac's own breath caught, mirroring the ghastly rhythm. It was alive, or some twisted version of life. The hand twitched again, sending a wave of nausea through him. He tried to rationalize, but the eyes were unmistakably human. They watched him, holding him hostage. Compelled, Mac brushed away debris, revealing more of the figure. Emaciated, dressed in tattered remnants, its chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. It was alive, trapped, watching him with terrifying intensity. He tried to speak, but fear choked his words. Who are you?" he whispered. The figure didn't answer, just stared, its silence more terrifying than any scream. Mac couldn't tear his gaze away. He was transfixed by the figure's eyes. Those dark, fathomless pools that seemed to reflect an eternity of suffering and, something else. A hunger. They held him captive with their unwavering gaze, stripping away his defenses, exposing his deepest fears. He felt a strange kinship with the figure, a shared sense of isolation and despair. It was as if, in that moment, their roles were reversed. He was the one trapped, imprisoned by his own morbid curiosity, while this creature held the key to his freedom. But what was he supposed to do? He couldn't just leave it there, sealed up in the wall like a macabre exhibit. But the thought of freeing it, of unleashing whatever dark force animated that decaying form, filled him with a primal terror that chilled him to the bone. He was caught in a nightmare of his own making, a spiral of fear and fascination from which there seemed to be no escape. And all the while, those eyes watched him patiently, expectantly. Max stumbled back from the wall, heart pounding. He'd bricked it up hastily, desperate to outrun his terror. The mortar was still damp, the scent of concrete dust heavy, but the wrongness lingered. The silence wasn't complete. The breathing was still there, faint, unmistakable. It wasn't coming from the wall anymore. It was inside his head. It wasn't the house breathing. It was him, or something inside him. Days turned into nights, a blurry, sleepless cycle of dread and denial. Mac avoided his bedroom, seeking solace in the cavernous emptiness of the mansion's other rooms. But the breathing followed him, a constant, rasping reminder of his sanity's unraveling. Then one morning he woke on the living room floor, a cold sweat clinging to him. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he had to see. The wall in his bedroom mocked him, a newly plastered facade hiding a terrifying truth. He ran his hand over the smooth surface, the faint tremor of his own fear echoing in the silence. And then he saw it. A crack, thin as a hair, tracing its way across the fresh plaster. The breathing, louder now, seemed to emanate from that single impossible fissure. Max stumbled back, his blood running cold. He'd bricked it up, sealed it tight. He'd seen to that personally. But the wall, it was breathing again. Panic clawed at his throat, threatening to consume him. He should leave, get out of the house, never look back. Yet some morbid compulsion rooted him to the spot. The crack widened, a slow, agonizing split in the plaster, as if something within was pushing its way out. Mac's hand, as if possessed by a will of its own, reached out, his fingers tracing the ragged edges of the fissure. And then he saw it, an eye, staring at him from the darkness within, the same bloodshot eye filled with an ancient knowing malice that had haunted his every waking moment. But this time it was closer than it should have been possible. A low guttural growl, barely audible but undeniably real, emanated from the widening crack. Mac's mind fractured, splintering under the weight of the impossible. He was losing his grip on reality, the line between sanity and madness dissolving like dust in the wind. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet as he desperately tried to put distance between himself and the wall that breathed. But the room seemed to shrink around him, the walls closing in, their once familiar dimensions warping and twisting. The breathing was all around him now, a chorus of rasping breaths that echoed in the very marrow of his bones. He was trapped, not within the walls of the mansion, but within the suffocating confines of his own fracturing mind. The face in the wall, that terrifying visage of death-given life, was no longer confined to the brick and mortar. It was everywhere he looked, in the shadows that danced at the edge of his vision, in the contorted reflections that mocked him from the dusty mirrors. Mac was no longer sure what was real, what was imagined. All he knew was fear, raw and consuming, as the walls of his sanity finally crumbled around him, leaving him lost in a darkness more profound than any tomb. He woke with a gasp, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to him like cobwebs. The air in the room was thick and stale, the only light a thin sliver of moonlight filtering through the grimy window panes. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was, his mind still trapped in the suffocating darkness of the dream. Then, the memory of the wall, the figure, the breathing came flooding back, a tidal wave of terror that threatened to drown him. But as his eyes adjusted to the gloom, a horrifying realization dawned on him. He wasn't in his bed, he wasn't even in his room. He was inside the wall. The space was cramped, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. The rough brick walls pressed in on him from all sides, a suffocating embrace that stole his breath away. He could feel the vibrations of the house around him, each creak and groan amplified in the confined space. And then he saw it. The hole. Staring back at him from the other side was himself, a mirror image, pale and wide-eyed with terror. Mac's scream died in his throat, a strangled gasp echoing in the narrow confines of his prison. Then slowly, a sinister grin spread across his doppelganger's face, a chilling, knowing grin. Max squeezed his eyes shut, willing himself to wake up. When he opened his eyes, he was on his bedroom floor, morning light streaming in. The wall was whole. No hole, no figure, no terror. Had it all been a dream? Or a hallucination brought on by fear? But deep down, a chilling certainty lingered. He could still hear faint, rasping breaths from within the walls. Was he truly free, or had something switched places with him in the darkness?